I thank the Minority Leader.
I recognize the Senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Minority Leader for his comments. And I'm here tonight with colleagues who have worked extremely hard to protect the sovereignty of Ukraine and to defend democracy in that country and, in fact, throughout the world. And I thank all of my colleagues for getting on the floor this evening and for the resolutions that they will be bringing forth. You know, Mr. President, I am not an historian, but I do know that for the last 250 years, since the inception of our great country, despite our imperfections, the United States has stood in the world as a symbol of democracy. And all over the world, people have looked to our country as an example of freedom and self-governance to which the rest of the world could aspire. People have long looked to our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution as blueprints for how to establish governments of the people, by the people, and for the people. Mr. President, tragically, all of that is now changing. As President Trump moves this country toward authoritarianism, he is aligning himself with dictators and despots who share his disdain for democracy and the rule of law. Just last week, in a radical departure from long-standing U.S. policy, the Trump administration voted against a United Nations resolution which clearly stated that Russia began the horrific war in Ukraine. That UN resolution also called on Russia to withdraw its forces from occupied Ukraine in line with international law. The resolution was brought forward by our closest allies, countries that we have been allied with for God knows how many years, including the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, and dozens of other democratic nations. 93 countries at the UN voted yes on that resolution. Rather than side with our long-standing allies to preserve democracy and uphold international law, President Trump voted with authoritarian nations like Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Belarus to oppose the resolution. Many of the other opponents of that resolution are undemocratic nations propped up by Russian military aid. But it wasn't just the UN vote. Pathetically, President Trump also told an outrageous lie, claiming that it was Ukraine that started the war, not Russia. He also called Zelensky a dictator rather than the leader of a democratic nation, as he is. Mr. President, as we discuss Ukraine tonight, it is terribly important that we not forget who Vladimir Putin is and why he is no friend of the United States and why we should not be in an alliance with him against Ukraine. Putin is the man who crushed Russia's movement toward democracy after the end of the Cold War. Putin is a man who steals elections, murders political dissidents, and crushes freedom of the press. He has maintained control in Russia by offering the oligarchs there a simple deal. If they grant him absolute power and share the spoils, and he, by the way, is one of the wealthiest people in the world, he would let them steal as much as they wanted from the Russian people. The result, while the vast majority of the Russian population struggles economically, Putin and his fellow oligarchs stash trillions of dollars in offshore tax havens. And so today, 26 years after he took power, Putin is the absolute ruler of Russia. And I think, as everyone knows, Russia's elections are blatantly fraudulent, a sham. And Putin is the man who sparked the bloodiest war in Europe since World War II. More than 3 years ago, on February 24, 2022, Putin ordered a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in clear violation of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. Russian land, air, and naval forces have attacked and occupied territory across Ukraine. Since that terrible day, more than 1 million people have been killed or injured because of Putin's war. Putin's forces have massacred civilians and kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, bringing them back to Russian re-education camps. These atrocities led the International Criminal Court to issue an arrest warrant for Putin in 2023 as a war criminal. A war criminal. That's who we are allying ourselves with. And still today, Russia continues its attacks, raining down hundreds of missiles and drones on Ukrainian cities. Russian forces illegally occupy about 20% of Ukraine's sovereign territory. Mr. President, this war could end today, right now, if Putin gave up his outrageous effort to conquer a neighboring country. The war could end today. The killing could stop right now if Putin gave that order. And that simply, Mr. President, is what my resolution says to Vladimir Putin. Stop the killing, obey international law, withdraw your forces and cease your attacks on Ukraine. And I honestly just don't know how anybody in the United States Senate could object to that simple demand. Mr. President, now more than at any time in recent history, it is imperative that the Senate come together in a bipartisan manner to make it clear that we stand for democracy, not authoritarianism, that we stand for international law, not conquest by force, and that we stand with Ukraine and fellow democracies throughout the world, and not with the murderous dictator of Russia. And so, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 109, which was submitted earlier today. Further, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from Idaho.
Reserving the right to object. Mr. President, I rise to object to this. Senator Sanders has brought us a resolution which very simply states that Russia must immediately and completely unconditionally withdraw from the territory of Ukraine. This is only, it isn't even a law, it isn't even a bill, it is only a resolution. Now, there isn't anybody that disagrees with this. I certainly agree with the substance of this. But this is going to have absolutely zero effect of any kind If my good friend Senator Sanders believes that Vladimir Putin is watching this show on TV and says, they passed a resolution saying I should get out of Ukraine, so I guess I'll pack up and go. You're delusional if you think it's going to have any effect of any kind on Vladimir Putin. However, having said that, I don't think it's a secret to anyone that there are very delicate negotiations going on. There are 4 entities involved. Obviously, Ukraine is involved, the United States is involved, Russia is involved, and our European allies are involved. There is constant conversation going on. I think a lot of people were upset when they saw the exchange this weekend, understandably. But look, what you're looking at is the tip of the iceberg. Everybody wants the same outcome, and that is to have peace in Ukraine. There's one man on this planet, one man that can make that happen, and that's Donald J. Trump. He promised he would do that in the election. He is making very significant strides in that regard. And to my good friend Senator Sanders, this is not helpful to the activities that are going on to try to get this resolved. You may think you know what's going on, but I can guarantee you, with absolute certainty, you do not know what's going on as far as the negotiations are concerned to get this over with. What you're looking at is the tip of the iceberg, and this is not going to be helpful to getting to the point that you want to get to, that I want to get to, that everyone wants to get to, and that is to get peace in Ukraine. So on that basis, Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard. I recognize the senator from Vermont.
Thank you. Let me respond to my friend from Idaho. I think you said, and I paraphrase you a bit, there is one man who can stop the war. You're right. But that man does not live here in Washington, D.C. That man happens to live in Moscow, and his name is Vladimir Putin. He is the one who started the war. And in my view, when we ally ourselves with Putin, when we threaten and, in fact, cut back on military support or intelligence support for Ukraine, do you know what we are telling that one man? We are saying, you got a green light. The United States is withdrawing. You do what you want. You continue the war. You continue to pummel the people of Ukraine, who have already suffered so terribly. So I think it is true. There are many approaches to how we can end this war, and I agree with my friend that we all have the common goal of wanting to end this war. But I think the fastest way forward is in a bipartisan way. You got 100 United States senators and hopefully 435 members of the House who stand up and say, Mr. Putin, you started this terrible war. You're acting illegally. You're acting barbarically. Stop that war. That is, to my mind, would be a major step forward to ending the atrocities we are currently seeing.
Senator from Idaho.
You know, Mr. President, I respect my friend, but I vehemently disagree that this resolution is going to cause Vladimir Putin to end this war. My good friend says that Vladimir Putin could end this war. He does not have the ability to end this war. This war is going to end when there is an agreement by the 4 entities involved, Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and our European allies. When those 4 reach an agreement, there will be an end to this war. That can be done by Donald J. Trump. I guarantee you, Vladimir Putin does not have the ability to bring those 4 entities together to end this war. Again, this is not helpful. You don't know what the negotiations that are going on, and this is going in the wrong direction, and that's the reason I objected. Thank you, Mr. President.
From Vermont.
One just brief remark, because I strongly disagree on this issue with my friend. You think it takes Trump to end the war? Do you think that Putin alone can't end the war? Well, who do you think started the war? Who do you think runs Russia with an iron fist? If tomorrow Putin thought it was to his advantage to end this war, he would do it. And as a dictator, he can do it. So with that, Mr. President, I would, I don't want to yield the floor. Yeah, did you want to?
Mr. President,
Senator from Idaho.
again, to my good friend Senator Sanders, I would say that Putin does not have that ability. He simply does not have the ability. You talked about how he started this and how he could end it. He could have ended it shortly after he started it. He is in so deep in this, he cannot end it. It is going to take an agreement between the four entities to end it. That's how it's going to end.
Could I just ask my friend, and I mean this sincerely, Senator Risch, this guy, would you agree with me that he is a dictator who runs Russia?
The answer to that's yes, but I don't want to do a quiz here.
All right. The point is he is a dictator, and he can end the war unilaterally, in my view.